Okay, hello guys. So today we're going to be doing a crash course on Module 2 of Year 11 Bio. So this is the organization of living things. All right, so this module has 3 dot points, a really big module. So first we've got the organization of cells, and then we'll learn about nutrient and gas requirements, and then we'll learn about transport in plants and animals as well. Okay, so let's get on to organization of cells. So this module, the purpose of this module is to learn about how cells are organized, and this is what the module's description is. So multicellular organisms typically consist of several interdependent transport systems that range in complexity and allow the organism to exchange nutrients, gases, and waste between the internal and external environments. Models of transport systems and structures have been developed over time based on evidence gathered from a variety of disciplines. The interrelatedness of these transport systems is critical in maintaining health and in solving problems related to sustainability in agriculture and ecology. Okay, so let's get on to the module. So the first dot point is differentiating unicellular, colonial, and multicellular organisms. So we'll be investigating the structures at the level of the cell and the organelle, and then we'll be relating their structures to their functions. So first, let's look at unicellular organisms. Do you guys know what unicellular organisms are? No? Okay, so unicellular organisms are cells that consist of only one cell. So uni means one, cell means cell. So most of the life forms on Earth are unicellular. That means they're made up of only one cell. They can carry all the essential functions for life, and these are the essential functions for life. So movement, sensitivity, reproduction, respiration, metabolism, growth, and excretion. So to be classified as a living organism, you need to have all of these essential functions. And examples of unicellular organisms include bacteria, paramecium, and cyanobacteria. These are just some examples here in the picture. All right. So let's look at colonial organisms now. Colonial organisms are similar to unicellular, except they live in groups. So they're colonies composed of many physically connected, interdependent, and individual unicellular organisms. So they're interdependent on each other and they can't survive by themselves. All individuals in the colony carry out each function necessary for life. Some contain cells with specialized functions that are coordinated with other cells for more efficient functioning. And examples include corals, sponges, siphonophores. So these all are individual cells, but they're working together to form an organism. Okay, and then we've got multicellular organisms. So multicellular organisms are composed of more than one cell, with groups of cells differentiating to take on specialized functions. Basically, what this means is there are more than one different type of cells working together to create an organism. And the different cells in the body have distinct functions, and they cannot exist alone. So they require cells, tissues, and organs that are specialized for specific functions. So for example, we've got red blood cells that carry oxygen around our body and kidney cells that function what the kidney does, so excreting water and waste from our body. And examples include plants, animals, and fungi. So these are multicellular organisms. Okay, so let's look at a summary of the features of unicellular, multicellular, and colonial organisms. So unicellular have one cell. They're mostly prokaryotes. So that means cells without membrane-bound organelles and without a membrane. Without a membrane-bound nucleus, I mean, sorry. Okay, and functions of cells, they are very unspecialized, so they just have the one function, and the lifespan is short. Colonial have multiple, so more than one cell. They can be both eukaryotic and prokaryotic, and the functions of cells, so they can be specialized and unspecialized as well, and their lifespan is longer than the unicellular cells. Multicellular involve multiple cells. They're mostly eukaryotic, so they have a nucleus and membrane-bound organelles. They have specialized functions, so each cell has a specific function, and the lifespan is very long for multicellular organisms. Okay, any questions for that at all? No? All right, let's have a look at some questions. So, which specialized cell performs the same basic function as a vacuole in an amoeba? I'll give you a second. Okay, so the answer is stomach cell. So the vacuole, the main purpose of a vacuole is to store food, and it's like a little sack where things are stored. That's what the stomach does in a multicellular organism. Okay, which term explains why individual cells are so small? All right, so for this one, the answer is diffusion. So individual cells are small. That means nutrients and food and water can diffuse in and out of the cell really quickly. If they were bigger, diffusion can't really work. So we need the specialized functions to carry out certain tasks. Okay, some characteristics of living things. So these include movement, reproduction, excretion, sensitivity, that sort of stuff. Okay, and the difference between unicellular, multicellular, and colonial. Unicellular have one cell, multicellular have more than one cell, with each cell having a certain function, and they work together to create one organism. And colonial organisms have unicellular cells that are working interdependently with each other to create an organism. Alrighty, now let's look at the structure and functions of tissues, organs, and organ systems. All right, so cell specialization is a key term that we have to know, and what it means is cell differentiation. And this is the process through which generic or common cells transform into specialized cells with defined tasks. So we've got stem cells that don't really have a function, they're just like there. When they differentiate, they turn into certain cells. So for example, they'll turn into brain cells, neurons, or red blood cells, or something like that. Okay, multicellular organisms are made up of many cells, and they all need to be supplied with oxygen and nutrients and require efficient waste management for the organism to function properly. Simple diffusion is not sufficient enough to meet these requirements. Therefore, specialization is required to perform those tasks. So, stem cells are the undifferentiated and have no specialized structure or function. They're just cells that are just lying around waiting to have a function. And then when differentiation occurs, they develop certain structures and features that allow them to carry out their functions. They can be either embryonic, so this is what the embryo has before it turns into like the fetus and the actual baby, or adults can have stem cells as well. In plants, the stem cells are found at the tips of the roots and the stem as well. Tissues are groups of cells that work together to carry a specific function. They're made up of cells that are specialized for a special function. So an example of a tissue would be like a muscle, which is made up of multiple muscle cells. There are three main types of tissues in plants. If we're looking at plants, we've got dermal tissue, which forms the outer coat of the plant. For example, the epidermis of the leaf. We've got vascular tissue, which transports materials through the plant. So this is your vessels inside the plant, like the xylem and the phloem. And then we've got ground tissue, which is the remainder of the plant. So the sclerenchyma of the plant. So this is just like the rest of the tissue that the plant is made up of. You can see that in the diagram here. And in animals, we've got four main types of tissue. We've got epithelial tissue. So this is the tissue that covers the lining of your organs, our skin as well. We've got connective tissue, which consists of the specialized cells as well as the non-living material to shape and support our organs. So bones, they're made up of cells, but they're also made up of calcium and other minerals to make it hard and strong for support. Muscle tissue, which allows for movement. Nervous tissue, which allows for communication between different body parts. So that's your neurons. Okay, and then let's look at organs. So organs are made up of two or more types of tissues working together for a specific function. An example of a plant organ is the leaf. the function of the leaf is to carry out photosynthesis. Leaves are made up of a combination of tissues, including the epidermis, the mesophyll, the xylem, the phloem, each of which have a special function to carry out. And this is what a leaf looks like, a cross-section of a leaf. So we've got all the different cells in the leaf. We've got the xylem, the phloem, the guard cells, the epidermis where the gas exchange occurs. Okay, and an organ for animals is the stomach. The main function of the stomach is to digest food. It is composed of a combination of tissues, including the mucosa, submucosa, muscularis, and the serosa. And you can see that here in this picture. Okay, and a system is a collection of organs working together by performing their specialized functions to make a whole living organism. And examples of systems in animals include the respiratory system, the digestive system, the nervous, muscular, skeletal, and your reproductive systems. And in plants, we've got the root system and the shoot system. So the systems in plants are a bit less complex, but we've both got systems. All right, so now let's look at the organization of organelles, cells, tissues, systems, and organisms. So complex multicellular organisms need specialized cells to form tissues, which carry out various roles within organs, which make up parts of a system to perform a specific function for the organism to survive. So this is the order, this is the hierarchy of the structural organization of an organism. So we start off with an organelle. So organelle is the specialized bodies in the cytoplasm of the cell that carry out specific cellular functions. So for example, we've got the mitochondria for energy, the nucleus which has your DNA, and then we've got the cell. So the cell contains the organelles inside of it, and the cell is the basic unit of life. In multicellular organisms, they are specialized for a particular function. So for an example, we've got nerve cells, we've got blood cells. And then the next one is tissues. So a group of cells create a tissue and they will perform a similar function, which is what one tissue is. For example, muscle tissue for movement and bone tissue for support and strength as well. And then after we've got a collection of tissues, that's what we call an organ. So different types of tissues grouped together to perform a particular function. For example, the stomach or the heart. And then after organ, we've got an organ system. So an organ system is a group of organs that perform a specific bodily function. So for example, we've got the stomach, the liver, and all of that makes up the digestive system. And then an organism is basically an individual living thing with multiple organ systems working together to create one functional organism. So a human, a cat, plants, anything like that. All right, so multicellular organisms depend on organ systems functioning to survive. Organ systems depend on organs and tissues to fulfill their roles. Organs depend on the tissues to fulfill their roles. Tissues depends on the cells. Cells depend on the organelles. And organelles provide the specialization to enable the cells to perform their tasks. So they're all linked together, and this is the hierarchy, so the order in which they go from smallest to the biggest. So obviously organelle is the smallest and the organism is the biggest. All right, any questions at all for that topic? Okay, well, let's see, get onto some questions. So list the 4 main types of animal tissue. All right, so if we have a look, these are 4 types of animal tissues: epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous tissue. It says list, so we just write them down. We don't have to explain. Okay, distinguish between cells, tissues, organs, and systems. So distinguish means to differentiate, so state the differences. So cells are the basic building blocks, tissues are a group of cells, organs are a group of tissues, and systems are a group of organs working together. Okay, and the hierarchy from the smallest to the biggest, it's organelles, cells, tissues, organs, organ systems, and organism. All right, Let's move on to the next point, which is nutrient and gas requirements. There are many structures that all living organisms require for their efficient functioning. Inorganic and organic substances are essential nutrients for both autotrophs and heterotrophs. So we'll learn about what autotrophs and heterotrophs are in a bit. These nutrients are required to supply energy to the organism and provide the raw materials to be used in building the structure of cells and living tissues. Okay, so let's look at the structure of autotrophs. In class, you will be looking at microscope images of dissected plants and materials. You might also do an experiment with the microscope where you get a plant and see the image of like a leaf, for example, through the microscope. All right, so let's get on to this. Most autotrophic organisms are plants. So autotrophs are organisms that create their own energy. So plants don't need anything except for like the sun and carbon dioxide to create energy. So autotrophs can create their own energy, and most of them are plants. Some like algae and stuff can also be autotrophs. Plants have specialized cells that are grouped into tissues such as photosynthetic tissues. These tissues, along with other tissues, form organs such as a leaf, which can carry out functions to support the effective functioning of a plant. Most plants are vascular plants and possess a transport system to move substances around the plant and provide support. Vascular plants contain the root and the shoot systems, each of which has specialized organs to carry out specific functions. So let's have a look at the systems of the plants. So we've got the root system, which obviously includes the roots and everything that is under the ground. And the main functions of the root system is to anchor the plant, so make it attached to the soil, and to absorb water and inorganic nutrients from the soil, and also to store food. For the efficient absorption of water and minerals, the root system requires a large surface area, and this is achieved through specialized structures such as flattened epidermal cells. So the outside cells of the roots are flat, so they can absorb things better. And they have extensions called root hairs. So these little tiny hair-like things. And basically what they do is they increase the surface area so more water and nutrients can be absorbed, and the branching structure of the root system. So it's not just one little root, it's got like many branches, kind of like a tree. That also increases the surface area for water and nutrient absorption. You can see that in this picture here. Okay. And then we've got the shoot system. So the shoot system consists of the stem and the leaves and pretty much anything that's on top of the ground. The three main tissues structures that are found in the shoot system are the dermal, vascular, and ground tissues. We kind of covered this a bit ago. Okay, so the stem consists of the stems, the trunk, and the branches. It has two main functions: structural support and holding up the leaves, and also a pathway for transport of water and nutrients from the roots to the leaves. And the leaves, the main functions of the leaves is to absorb sunlight and carbon dioxide to produce glucose in a process called photosynthesis. Basically, that means the leaves are the ones that create energy for the plant. And leaves are broad, flat, and thin. This allows for the maximum surface area for absorbing light and carbon dioxide. And leaves are thin, which ensures that light penetrates through all the cells for maximum photosynthesis. And this is what the structure of a leaf looks like. You've got all the little cells in there. This is the stoma, which is where the gases go in and out from. And then this is the upper epidermis of the leaf. Now we've got different cells inside of the leaf. Okay, let's look at some technology that are used to determine the structure of plants. Obviously, we can look at plants from outside and know the structure, but we also want to look at the internal structure of plants, like roots and stuff, without damaging it. This is how we can do it. We can use digital cameras to take photos of the plant from different angles to create a 3D image using a computer program, but we can also use MRI and radio waves to generate 3D image of plant structures. And this is an example of that. This is an image of a root where they took a photo of the roots of a plant using MRI, you can see the red stuff there. That's the starch in the roots. And it allows you to see the different parts of a root as well. And this is used to study the plant and the movement of nutrients along the plant as well. Okay, any questions for that topic? No? All right, if there are any questions, you can put on the chat as well. Okay, so let's have a look at some questions. Define autotrophic organisms and give examples. So autotrophs are organisms that can create their own energy and they don't need anything else for food. So for example, plants, we've got some type of algae that can be autotrophs as well. Okay, explain the functions of the tissues found inside of a leaf. So we've got some tissues inside of the leaf include the xylem and the phloem, and those are important for nutrient and water absorption and transport around the plant. And explain the distribution of chloroplasts in certain plants. So this is an application of your knowledge. So chloroplasts are the organelles that are responsible for the green color of the plant. If you look at different plants, so the darker the leaf in the plant, the more chloroplasts it has. And they also allow for the absorption of sunlight to make photosynthesis as well. So if the plant is in a very nice sunny area, it wouldn't have to be as dark because you don't need that much sunlight for photosynthesis. But if it's in like the ground floor of a rainforest, for example, you would notice that those plants are darker green because you need more chloroplasts to increase the area for photosynthesis to occur. Yeah, okay. Now we'll look at the function of different plant structures. And this one includes the different types of plants. So we've got two different types of plants. We've got vascular and non-vascular. And that is the types are based on the presence of transport and support structures. So not all plants are vascular, meaning they don't all have vessels inside of them. So non-vascular plants do not have specialized structures for support or transport, and they include things like moss, and they use diffusion and osmosis to move materials into and out of the plant. These are small and they're not as complex, so they can use diffusion and osmosis. However, a lot of plants are big and large and they are very complex, so we need to have a vascular system, which is a transport system to move products and substances around the plant, as well as specialized structures that provide structure to the plants. And these are the two types of vascular tissues. We've got the xylem and the phloem. So the xylem transports water and minerals throughout the plant, and the phloem transports glucose and other plant products around the plant. So we need to provide water to all the cells in the plant, and we also need to provide glucose for energy for all the cells in the plant. And that's what the xylem and the phloem are responsible for. Okay, this dot point also needs us to know how the movement of products, how products are moved around the plant and how we can trace where they are in the plant. So let's look at photosynthesis. Now, photosynthesis is the process which autotrophs use to make their own energy. And this is the chemical equation for it. So we use water and carbon dioxide in the presence of sunlight to create glucose for energy and oxygen as a byproduct. And the question is, how are these products developed? And does the oxygen come from the carbon dioxide or does it come from the water, the oxygen that is released? And we can use that, we can figure that out with radioactive tracers, which determine which reactants are used to make which products. Now, if a plant is exposed to carbon dioxide with a different isotope of oxygen, an isotope is a different version of oxygen. This will be detected exclusively in the glucose produced by the plant. However, if the plant is exposed to water containing a different oxygen isotope, these oxygen isotopes will be found in the oxygen released. So from this, the oxygen is released from the water and the glucose takes the oxygen from the carbon dioxide. And scientists can trace this with the radioactive tracers and figure out exactly where each product are and where they move and how they move inside the plant as well. Yeah, they can also trace the movement of glucose produced by photosynthesis. Okay, now let's look at the gas exchange structures in plants and animals. Gas exchange is mainly involved in respiration. Let's look at how this occurs in different plants and animals. All organisms need to exchange gases. Plants need to take in carbon dioxide for photosynthesis and release oxygen as a byproduct. Most organisms undergo cellular respirations, taking in oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide. So plants take in carbon dioxide, release oxygen. Animals take in oxygen, release carbon dioxide. A gas exchange in organisms is governed by three key factors: a large surface area for gas exchange, so you need area for gas to be exchanged. And the environment for gas exchange must be moist because gases are dissolved in water before passing through the cell membrane by diffusion. They don't pass through in the gas state, they pass through in a dissolved state. So it needs to be moist and close contact with the blood supply or transport system to carry these gases between cells and gas exchange organs. So the blood supply needs to be close to the organ responsible for respiration, for example, the lungs, where the gases are exchanged. And this doesn't apply for plants because they just use diffusion for gas exchange. So it just goes from area of high concentration to low concentration. But animals need specific structures to allow for gas exchange. Let's look at gas exchange in plants. So it occurs in the leaves via the stomata. Stomata are little holes in the leaves. Photosynthesis occurs only when the plant is receiving sufficient light, water, and suitable temperatures. So leaves take in carbon dioxide and give oxygen mostly during the day. And at night, in the leaves, gas exchange tends to be the opposite. So at night, oxygen is taken and carbon dioxide is given off for most plants. And you can see that here. So in the day when there's sunlight and lots of water, they take in carbon dioxide, release oxygen. And in the night, it's opposite. Okay, and let's look at the methods of gas exchange. So in plants, it occurs using diffusion. So due to the lower concentration gradient within the stomata, and it passes through the guard cells, so which are like these things, the cells that are protecting the stomata. So guard cells open and close, which basically open and close the stomata. Under the ground, oxygen in soil spaces or dissolved in soil water simply diffuses into the root hair cells. So oxygen can also be absorbed from under the ground, not just from the air. And it's also done by diffusion. And in the woody stems, small openings called lenticels allow for exchange of gases. So it's mostly the leaves doing gas exchange. However, the roots and the stems can also do gas exchange. And you can see that here in the picture. So this is your roots having gas exchange. So you got trapped air in the soil. And then this is your woody stem. So these are the little holes called the lenticels that allow for gas exchange. And then this is the stomata in the leaves, which are the holes that can be closed and opened depending on how much gas exchange is needed. Okay, let's look at gas exchange in animals. So the purpose of gas exchange in animals is to take in oxygen and remove carbon dioxide. Gas exchange occurs in the lungs in mammals. The lungs are the major respiratory organs in mammals, and the respiratory organ system is composed of different organs such as the larynx, trachea, bronchus, bronchioles, alveoli. The gas enters the lungs during breathing. So when we breathe in, we take in gas, and the intercostal muscles contract. So we've got muscles in our chest, they will contract, the ribs will move up and out, the diaphragm will move down, and our lungs fill up with air and it comes in through the trachea, the bronchi, and the bronchioles. You can see that here. You've got the trachea, the bronchi, which are your two lung branches, and then the bronchioles, which are the smaller branches of the lungs. And then the alveoli are at the end of the bronchioles. So those are the little air sacs where gas exchange occurs. So this is your blood vessels. the oxygen is inside of the alveoli. It goes from the alveoli into your capillaries. So from the capillaries, it puts in carbon dioxide into the alveoli, and then the oxygen comes from the alveoli into the blood vessels. And this is done through diffusion. So when you breathe in air, it has a lot of oxygen as compared to the capillaries here. These have very low levels of oxygen because this is a deoxygenated blood that is coming from the cells that have already used up the oxygen. So the oxygen levels here are very low, and in the alveoli, the levels of oxygen are high. So the oxygen comes from the alveoli into the bloodstream, and the opposite for the same for carbon dioxide. So in the alveoli, the carbon dioxide levels are low. We've got more oxygen in the environment. And then in the blood vessels, the carbon dioxide levels are very high because they're a waste product of us, the cells, using the oxygen. So they release carbon dioxide into the blood. We have lots of carbon dioxide into the blood, so it will travel from the high concentration into the blood into the alveoli, which have low concentration. So this blood will now become oxygenated, and then there will be lots of carbon dioxide inside the alveoli, and then we breathe that carbon dioxide out. And then we breathe in gases again, the oxygen gets put into the blood vessels, carbon dioxide gets out of the body. So that's how we do respiration. Okay, if you have any questions, you can let me know, put it in the chat. Okay, and then in insects, it's a little bit different because they don't have like the whole lungs and the respiratory systems like we do. They don't have lungs or gills to facilitate gas exchange. Instead, it occurs through a series of holes called spiracles found along the sides of the body. So on the sides of the body of the insect, we've got little holes, and that's where the air moves in out. So they've got little tiny trachea, which allows the air to infiltrate the whole body. The trachea tubes are moist, and the network of tubes increase the surface area and allow for efficiency in gas exchange. And the gases diffuse directly to the body cells, which are never far from a trachea tube. Similar to mammals, but a little bit different. So you can see that here, the trachea takes the gases directly to the organs. Okay, and it's a bit different in fish as well, because they're under the water and not like in the environment with oxygen. So gas exchange occurs in fish and other aquatic animals via their gills. So the gills extract the dissolved oxygen from the water and remove carbon dioxide from the body system. Deoxygenated blood flows into the lamellae of the gills. So these are the little structures in the gills here. And it is released into the water, and then the oxygen is absorbed into the blood. So they release carbon dioxide into the water, and the dissolved oxygen from the water is absorbed into the blood. And it's the same process. There's more oxygen in the water that is flowing through the gills. So the carbon dioxide comes out of the deoxygenated blood, and then the oxygen from the water goes into the deoxygenated blood where there's less oxygen. And where there's more carbon dioxide inside the blood vessels, it comes out to the water where there's less carbon dioxide. Okay, that's that. Any questions, let me know. Let's have a look at these questions. How does the respiratory system of an insect differ to that of a mammal? So mammals have lungs and a complex system. Insects don't have lungs, so they have little trachea and holes on the surface of their skin. What are the 4 requirements for gas exchange? So obviously we need the gas, we need the moist environment, we need surface area for gas exchange as well. And we also need the concentration gradient for the gas to be exchanged. Okay, explain how each requirement is met in the lungs of a mammal. We kind of went through that up here. So we have the large surface area, we've got the moist environment in the lungs because the lungs are moist. Then we've got the blood vessels next to the alveoli in the lungs, and then diffusion occurs with the concentration gradient. Okay. Now, let's have a look at evaluating scientific theory about specific plant functions. We didn't always know exactly how plants work. It took a lot of scientists and a lot of theories to figure out the information that we know today. Okay, so let's look at photosynthesis and how we kind of got the knowledge about photosynthesis. It took a few hundred years. Okay, so photosynthesis is the process through which autotrophs make their own energy. We went through this a bit ago. Now, it provides a method by which plants can produce their own source of energy, allowing them to survive, grow, and this process have long intrigued scientists. But not until like recently we didn't exactly know what photosynthesis was, and it took over 100 years to get an understanding of this process, and obviously a technological advancement have helped a lot. Okay, so let's look at the people that were involved in the process of photosynthesis. So the ancient Greeks hypothesized that plants gained mass by absorbing the soil. Obviously, you see a plant, you grow it in the soil, and then it starts growing. So their hypothesis was the plants will eat the soil and they will gain the mass. We know that isn't true anymore because most of the mass comes from water and the air, and only a little bit comes from the nutrients in the soil. And then there was a scientist called Jan Baptista van Helmont in the 1600s. He concluded that the plants gain mass from the water. So up until the 1600s, they didn't know that the gases in the environment had anything to do with the plant weight because they couldn't see the gases being exchanged, obviously, and they had no technology to test it. So he concluded that the plants gain mass from water. And he did this by pretty much growing this one, I think it was an oak or something, in this plant pot for like 5 years. And then he watered it, and he noticed that in the beginning of the 5 years, the soil mass, he measured it, and after 5 years he measured the soil mass again, and he noticed that it was very, very similar. So he's like, plants don't eat soil, they gain all the mass from water, because water is the only other thing that was added to the plant and allowed it to grow. And then in the early 1700s, we've got Joseph Priestley. He concluded that plants restored air responsible for life. He didn't know that this air was oxygen when he did his experiments, but now we know that it is oxygen. And Jan Eigenhaus proved that plants produce the oxygen, so the certain exact type of air. And then we've got Nicholas Theodore de Saussure, I don't know how to say that. In the 1800s, he showed plants need carbon dioxide and water to grow. So in the 1800s, that's when we figured out we need water, we need nutrients from the soil, and we also need carbon dioxide for it to grow. And then we've got Julius in 1864. He showed that starch was produced in the presence of light and linked this to the chloroplasts. So we don't really know about like all the certain chemical compounds, but he did realize it was starch, and starch is pretty much what glucose is. And he showed that we need light and we need the chloroplasts, which are the organelles responsible for photosynthesis. And then finally in 1930, like a lot of years later, Cornelius van Niel proposed the general equation for photosynthesis. So he figured out all the things involved, like water, carbon dioxide, sunlight, and then glucose and oxygen as the products, and he proposed this equation. So it took a long time for this whole process to be discovered. Now we have a really good understanding of it. Okay, now let's look at the transformation, cohesion, tension theory. Now this word sounds complicated, but it's not that complicated. Okay, so this theory explains the mechanism by which water flows through the xylem of the plant, and it is due to the combined effects of transpiration, cohesion, and tension. We'll learn about what these are. So transpiration is the evaporation of water through the stomata of the plants. Cohesion is the cohesion means the water molecules are attracted to each other, so it will move in a cohesive stream. So the water molecules, when they're close to each other, they'll kind of bind with each other and they'll form a little stream inside the plant. So they're not existing separately, they're existing together, kind of like they're stuck together by glue or something. They'll always stick together. And then tension is the negative pressure in the leaf created by evaporation. The tension pulls the water column upward. So the question is, when a plant, especially like the tall trees, how do they bring the water from the roots, from the ground, all the way to the top of the leaves against gravity? So that would require a lot of energy. Obviously, plants don't have that much energy to take water like up 100 meters, right? This is the theory which explains how the water moves from down from the ground all the way to the top to all the leaves. So this is what the theory says. So water vapor diffuses out of the stomata in transpiration and from inside of the cells. And then this tension pulls water from the veins into the space between the cell wall and the cell membrane of the mesophyll cells. And then this tension also pulls the water column upwards and outwards in the xylem of veins and the leaves. So from the leaves, the water is evaporating upwards, and that will create tension that will draw the water out from inside the plant, and it will pull them outwards. And then the water molecules have cohesion, so they'll always stick together. So it will attract more water molecules in like a little string. From the roots, they will all come together like a string, and it will go up and travel up the plant to the leaves and out of the plant as well. And then water moves into the xylem by osmosis. So in the roots, the water comes from the soil by osmosis, and then it just keeps traveling up using the pressure created from the transpiration and the evaporation, the tension, that's what it's called. So that's what we call the transpiration cohesion tension theory. So the transpiration creates a suction of water up the stem and the roots in a transpiration stream. So you can see that here. And then it occurs due to the diffusion of water from a high concentration inside of the leaf to the environment, which has lower water concentration, which is the outside bits. And when water is lost from the intercellular spaces by transpiration, more water is drawn from the xylem tissue. So if you lose water from inside of the leaves, the water will have to be drawn in from the roots into the xylem and then put it back into the veins to replace it. This increases the tension on the column of the water and draws more water up from the roots. And this explains how water can move through plants against gravity and without the force of a pump. Yeah, so they'll just stick to each other, they'll bind it to each other, and then it will just get drawn up because of the tension created from evaporation. Okay, do you guys have any questions? All right, let's move on to the questions. So outline the cohesion tension theory. So that's what we just did here. Okay, next one, digestion of food in mammals. Okay, trace the digestion of food in the mammalian digestive system. So we'll learn about physical digestion, chemical digestion, absorption of nutrients, mineral and water, and elimination of solid waste. So animals are heterotrophs. That means we cannot create our own energy, and we must eat food to create energy. And the food must be energy rich and made by other organisms, either plants or animals. So we either eat the plants, which have the starch and the glucose for energy, or we eat other animals, which have eaten the plants to get the energy. So either way, we're eating food which has energy in it to give us energy. And it's composed of complex carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, which must be digested before being absorbed into the body and used by the cells to produce energy. And digestion involves breaking of large molecules down into smaller units, which can be carried around the body and transported across cell membranes. So we've got different types of digestion. We've got physical digestion. So this is the mechanical breakdown of food into smaller chunks for easier absorption by the body. And examples include chewing, peristalsis, and bile. So these physically break down the food into smaller pieces. And then we've got chemical digestion. And this involves the breakdown of food into simpler substances using chemicals. And the chemicals that we look at in digestion are called enzymes. And each enzymes have their own specific functions, but the main point of like the stomach enzymes, for example, is to break down the food, and they speed up the breakdown of large compounds into smaller molecules, which can then be absorbed into the bloodstream and supplied all over the body. So the large compound would be, for example, a complex carbohydrate. We break that down into a simpler carbohydrate, then we break that down further into glucose, which can be absorbed by our body into the bloodstream and then used for energy creation. You can see the whole process of digestion here in this picture. So we eat the food, it goes break it down and then it goes into the stomach. That breaks it down even further, and then it gets absorbed into the small intestine, and then the water and stuff gets absorbed in the large intestine, and then we have the excretion waste, which is our feces. Okay, absorption of nutrients, minerals, and water. So absorption is a process where water, minerals, and nutrients pass from the digestive system into your bloodstream. Most digested food particles are absorbed through the villi of the small intestine. These are little hair-looking cells that have lots of surface area, so we can absorb a lot of different things from the small intestine into the bloodstream. So these are your blood vessels where food is absorbed into. And then in the largest intestine, we've got most of the water being reabsorbed via osmosis. And along with the water, we've got soluble minerals and vitamins also absorbed in the large intestines. And then elimination is the passing of undigested material out of the alimentary canal from the rectum, where excretion is the removal of byproducts of metabolism. So obviously all the stuff that is not able to be digested is eliminated from the body as feces. Okay, let's look at the different nutrient and gas requirements for autotrophs and heterotrophs. Obviously, we'll need similar requirements, but also there are some differences. Autotrophs supply their own food, and heterotrophs depend on other organisms for food. Okay. So autotrophs require oxygen for aerobic respiration, and they require carbon dioxide for photosynthesis and chemosynthesis. We don't need to know too much about chemosynthesis, but photosynthesis is what we need. So the main thing for gas in autotrophs, they need carbon dioxide, and they use oxygen only for emergencies for aerobic respiration. But heterotrophs use oxygen for aerobic respiration. We don't use carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is a waste for heterotrophs. Water, so water is a reactant involved in photosynthesis, and basically the water donates for the glucose production, specific production. And then in heterotrophs, we need water for the maintenance of complex systems and the organs in the higher life forms. Energy for autotrophs is the sunlight for things such as plants, and then the energy for heterotrophs comes from the glucose that we get from eating the food that we need for energy. And other nutrients, so autotrophs need inorganic molecules to aid in their metabolic processes. They'll need minerals such as magnesium, manganese, iron. They'll also need salts like sodium, potassium, calcium. And they gather these minerals from the root, bacteria. Some bacteria can be autotrophs as well. They gather them from active transport from their surroundings. So active transport is like diffusion, but you need energy for the transport. And then in heterotrophs, we also need inorganic molecules. We also need the cofactors and the salts. And these are acquired through ingestion. So we have to eat them, and then they'll be absorbed after we eat them physically. Okay, any questions for that at all? You can put it on the chat. All righty. Okay, now let's look at the transport of minerals, water, all of that inside of plants and animals. Inorganic and organic substances are essential nutrients for both autotrophs and heterotrophs, and these nutrients are required to supply energy to the organism and provide raw materials to be used in building the structures of cells and living tissues. And we'll look at the transport systems in animals and plants by comparing their structures, including macroscopic structures, but we can look at other things as well. Okay, so in mammals, one of the main transport system is the circulatory system. The blood is the fluid that transports oxygen and nutrients to each body cell and carries away the waste from each body cell as well. 55% of the blood, so majority of the blood is this yellowish fluid called plasma, and the remainder is made up of various types of blood cells, including red blood cells, which are the majority of the blood cells, and then we've got white blood cells and platelets, which are a bit fewer. And we've got different organs as part of the circulatory system. Main organs are the heart and the blood vessels. So the heart is at the center of the circulatory system. It pumps blood to all of the body. And it is made up of multiple layers of tissue. This image shows the circulatory system here. So in the heart, from the heart, we've got different blood vessels branching out to the rest of the body. We've got the arteries and the veins, and we've got the capillaries as well. You need to know the differences between the three. So arteries take blood away from the heart into the rest of the body, and the veins take the blood to the heart from the rest of the body. So you can see that here. From the heart, the arteries, so A for artery, A for away, from the heart, and then the veins take blood to the heart from the rest of the body. And capillaries are the tiny blood vessels that form a network around the tissues of the body to ensure each body cell is close to a blood supply. So arteries and veins are big, you can kind of see them, but capillaries are pretty much microscopic. They're so small, they're the same size as each cell. So they have to provide blood supply to every single cell in the body. So capillaries are really, really tiny. Okay, gas exchange between internal and external environments in plants and animals. So let's look at gas exchange in animals. Gas exchange is essential for delivering oxygen to each cell and removing carbon dioxide from each cell as well. So blood passes through the capillaries in the tissues. Oxygen is released from the red blood cells and diffuses along the concentration gradient into the cells. So the red blood cells in the blood carry the oxygen, and as each red blood cell passes the cells in your body, the red blood cell has a lot of oxygen, and the cell itself would have used up all the oxygen. So the oxygen will go from the red blood cell to the cell down the concentration gradient. And at the same time, the cell will have released carbon dioxide as a waste product of creating energy, and that will come out of the cell into the bloodstream, and the blood will go back to the heart and the lungs to be oxygenated again. Meanwhile, the concentration of the carbon dioxide is high because of its constant production by cellular respiration. So it diffuses from the cells into the blood. And then from the blood, it goes to the lungs where the opposite happens. So the blood gets oxygenated, and then the carbon dioxide gets expelled out of the body. Inside, this is what we kind of went through before. So inside the alveoli, there is a high concentration of oxygen and low concentration of carbon dioxide. So gas exchange occurs in the alveoli and the capillaries surrounding the alveoli. So when we breathe in, we take in the oxygen from the lungs to the bloodstream, and from the bloodstream, the carbon dioxide goes out of our lungs into the environment. In plants, gas exchange occurs in the leaves and the stomata, like we mentioned before. Photosynthesis occurs when there is sufficient light. And we know that during the day, oxygen is taken in. Oxygen is not taken in during the day. Carbon dioxide is taken in during the day and oxygen is released. And at night, oxygen is taken in and carbon dioxide is given off. And they use oxygen at night for aerobic respiration, similar to how animals use oxygen for aerobic respiration. Okay, structure and function of the transport systems. This is in plants. So in animals, we've got the circulatory system where we have the heart and the blood vessel. And in plants, we've got the xylem and the phloem. So the xylem transports water, and then the phloem transports sugar and other dissolved nutrients. And these vessels are present throughout the whole plant, from the roots to the leaves. And they're composed of different cell types and have different mechanisms of transport. So the xylem, it moves in little spirals. It has little spirals on it, and it transports water, and it is a one direction flow from the roots to the leaves. That's supposed to say direction. And the transport is evapotranspiration. So this is the transpiration, cohesion, tension theory. So it goes up from the roots to the leaves. And in the phloem, we've got phloem fibers and sieve cells and companion cells. So these are what the phloem is made up of. You can see that here. And it transports sugars, minerals, and other nutrients to different parts of the plant. Unlike the xylem, which only goes from down to up, the phloem can move nutrients and stuff in multiple directions wherever they are required. And it uses active transport, so it needs energy to move those substances in multiple directions, up, down, sideways as well, to every single cell of the plant. And this is what it looks like here. So this is a real image, and this is just a diagram. The xylem has got little spirals here, and then the phloem has these sieve plates. And basically, this branches off to all the cells of the plant, provides water and nutrients. Okay, and in animals, we've looked at the mammals where we got the circulatory system with the heart. All different types of mammals, but also all other animals have some form of circulatory system. They are different for each organism. There's two different types of circulation. So some organisms have open circulation and some have closed. So closed circulation is when you've got all the blood inside of the blood vessels in distinct areas. But we've got open circulation system where the blood can just be out in the open in the body. All vertebrates have a closed circulation system. So fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, mammals have a closed system. So the heart pumps blood around the blood vessels, but invertebrates, so insects, worms, and snails, have an open circulation system. So in an open circulation system, the blood isn't limited to the blood vessels. It's not actually blood, it's just fluid composed of blood and all these other different things. It flows directly among the body cells and organs before collecting back into the veins to return to the heart. So it's pretty much like just inside of the body where the organs are. It's just all there, and then it will collect back into the veins and then go back to the heart. This is what it looks like here. Obviously, it's much less complex. It's just like a one-way movement kind of thing. All right, let's look at the different transport mediums and the composition of transport medium as it moves around an organism. This is for animals. Okay, so when blood moves around these different organs, we'll see the change in the composition of certain minerals, oxygen, carbon dioxide, gases, etc. So in the lungs, the main purpose of the lungs is to allow for gas exchange. So the lungs would obviously remove carbon dioxide and put in oxygen into the blood. So the effects on the blood composition would be increase in oxygen and decrease in carbon dioxide. When the blood moves to the muscles allow for movement, and they use the oxygen in the blood and glucose as well to create energy through aerobic respiration, which requires an input of oxygen and glucose, and then carbon dioxide is released as a byproduct. So as blood moves through the muscle, we have a decrease in oxygen because it is used by the muscle cells, and an increase in carbon dioxide, which is released as a byproduct, a decrease in amino acids and glucose because they are used by the muscle, and increase in nitrogenous waste. So this is the type of waste produced by the muscle when they function. In the brain coordinates the functions of all the body. This process is very energy intensive and the cells require a lot of oxygen and glucose. So we will notice a decrease in oxygen, increase in carbon dioxide, decrease in glucose, and increase in nitrogenous waste. So this is what is released as a byproduct as well. In the liver, we've got different functions like detoxification, protein synthesis, production of digestive chemicals, and storage of glucose. So oxygen will obviously decrease, glucose will also decrease, amino acids will also decrease, toxins will decrease because the liver removes the toxins from the blood. Carbon dioxide will increase because it releases that as a byproduct. Proteins will increase and hormones will increase because the liver releases proteins and hormones essential for body function. And these are all released into the bloodstream. Okay, so let's look at the small intestine. So small intestines where all the absorption of your food occurs. So we will obviously have an increase in the minerals and all the nutrients that we need for the body, such as amino acids, glucose, fatty acids, glycerol, vitamins, minerals as well, and a little bit of water. So in the intestines, we've got all these things being absorbed. So the blood will be full of all of these products. And obviously there will be a decrease in oxygen because the cells need to take that oxygen for their function. And then in the kidney removes the wastes from the body and balances the level of salt and water. So in the kidney, there will be an increase or decrease in the water and salt level depending on the body's needs. And there will be a decrease in nitrogen waste because the kidney removes the waste. The kidney absorbs the waste and removes it through the bladder out of the body. So the nitrogen waste in the blood will be reduced, and there will obviously be a reduction in oxygen. Okay, that was the end of all of the module 2. It's all summarized. If you have any questions, let us know, and we'll go through the questions. Okay, I'm going to stop recording now.